Hi everyone, welcome back to the DCD talk stage. It is my pleasure to be moderating this last session on this stage for this year's DCD New York. My name is Gabriela Gillette Perez and I am the content manager for DCD live events, and it is my pleasure today to talk power market dynamics with Jeremiah Collins, head of utilities and incentives at Prime Data Centers. So thank you so much for joining me today, Jeremiah. So, power market dynamics, that's the topic today. So tell us a little bit around how would you describe the current state of power in North America?
We are in a full-blown power crisis at this moment. We talk about 2030 a lot and what that means and where we're going to be. And, we're saying it's going to be another 50 gigawatts in 2030. We're going to see the data industry using twice as much in consumption and electricity over the next 5 years. We're talking about that in the future. But what we're not talking about is what's happening today in 2024. What we're seeing in Northern Virginia, what we're seeing in Georgia, what we're now seeing in Arizona, what we've been seeing in Northern California and Silicon Valley and Santa Clara. We're seeing, those are just the tip of the iceberg and the bellwethers of what's happening. Those are markets that are under duress and being written about. But I believe every single major market in the United States and a lot of markets in Europe are just about to emerge into the same type of duress. And it's a serious problem right now.
And do you think, obviously we talk about power constraints a lot, this is after all a data center event, and so it does come up one way or another. Do you think the industry's aware of the problem as much as it should be, or do you think it's still, as you mentioned, just the headline stuff and we're not really?
I think everybody's feeling the pain. You look at all the amazing groups in here, and a common topic is how can we generate on site? How can we interconnect faster? And then to meet the climate initiatives that we need to meet and to be responsible corporate citizens is adding another layer of complexity.
So how did we get here? What has led to this crisis that we now find ourselves in?
It started with climate change. And when we identified, we had superstorms and we started climate pattern change and we saw all these things, we began to look at the anthropogenic causes that we were contributing to. And so there was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to hey, we got to shut down some of our bigger emissions. So we went to the power industry, which had big, and we went to coal and heavy fuel oil. And we turned a lot of it off. Then enter energy transition. And we bring in renewables. And renewables interact with our grid in different ways than our thermal generation has. And it presented new challenges to our TDUs and RTOs and ISOs and everything else. And then COVID happens. So we've retired more. We haven't quite replaced it. And that replacement, by the way, isn't if you retire 200 megawatts of coal and you bring in 200 megawatts of renewables, it's not a one-for-one offset. And as COVID went on, people moved further and further out. They said, if I'm going to work from home, I'm going to work in a beautiful place. So that load was getting pushed further and further out. That infrastructure wasn't there. And so all the while, the TDUs are trying to keep up and add lines and do the things they need to do, but they need to immediately upgrade, these suburban and rural areas. It's death by 1,000 cuts. You add EVs to that. So now we're going to take the emissions out of our transportation industry, and we're going to electrify that, and that adds new demand. Infrastructure is growing at a voracious rate, and for the first time in the United States history, we're seeing growth rates go from, say, 1% a year or totally flat to a new growth trajectory.
So what do we do about it? Is there a solution?
Yeah, this is a really complex problem. And if you look at, our grid, the grid infrastructure was developed mostly in the 1950s. And we have created this sort of Byzantine patchwork quilt from then on. And we've just added little bits and pieces here, but those are all to address immediate needs, but not the long-term needs. So we're not adding 500 kV lines as quickly as we can, 345s, or in PJM's case, they're going to 700s. And our average age of infrastructure in our grid right now is actually 45 years, and 25% of that is 55 years or greater. Right. So, with use and time, we have performance degradation. So we're seeing, line losses growing a little bit. We're seeing transformation losses growing a little bit. We're seeing other concerns. We still have major constraints within our grid. We still have, we have whole projects that are built that we can't interconnect. And what I'm getting to there is serious transmission and distribution problem. I don't think we necessarily have a generation problem. I think that we have a TDU problem. I think that we need to address that problem. I'm told all the time, we can get you power in 2031. That's not a generation problem. What that tells me is they can't get the lines to me, or they can't, I'm in an area that's constrained. It looks completely normal, but we don't have the load studies that the utilities have. And so that's a long answer to say, I think we're going to see a need for some federal intervention. Oliver Wyman put a study out in 2020 and it said, we spent $133 billion on our grid. The image in my mind was, let's take a 1-gallon bucket and put it right here. Let's take an eyedropper and put 1 drop in there. The estimates for our grid right now are in the $2 trillion range. And so you think about that kind of money and the infrastructure that's needed, it's a big undertaking. So we need to have groups like iMasons and Data Center Coalition and all of this collective room. We can solve this problem, but we need to focus on it today. And in the near term, we're going to go to generating on-site. And that's going to create some of its own complications, and it's going to be expensive. But in the meantime, we're going to get there. But we have to solve the bigger issue, and that's working with government to fix our grid.
And I guess what you're saying is that the industry has a part to play in this, right? Obviously, the grid plays multiple roles, but the industry itself is going to have to take an active role in that to solve the problem.
100%. Yeah.
Now, to throw another spanner in the works, what are your thoughts around sort of the demands that people are expecting around sort of AI and the workloads and the demand on power that's going to bring into
this? Think about the problems that we're having today. And we're just now starting to put our big toe into AI. And so as AI is coming on, if we're having trouble now, that appetite is going to get bigger. And then on the backside of that will be quantum computing. So AI may solve some of our problems too. It may, we see different AI companies that have grid solutions that are really unique and fascinating. Stuff that I, as a power guy, still can't understand, but see the data from that and see that it's very, very effective.
So I guess almost there's two sides to the AI question then. There's obviously the challenges it's going to bring with the bigger power demands, but as you said, it could also be a way to solve part of the problem. I don't think it will solve everything, right? But
it's part of the answer for sure.
You obviously mentioned sort of government investment and government intervention, as well as obviously the data center industry. So do you think that one of the areas that potentially we need to be focusing on is on further collaboration? We need to be having more of these conversations. Obviously, you mentioned some groups that obviously are doing some good things, but do you think that's sort of step one in dealing with this?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question, because we don't talk about that enough. We need to spend more time as an industry starting at the local level, educating our politicians, educating the media on what's really going on and what really is happening and how we as an industry work. In the United States, we might be grabbing 2.2% of the total demand, but think about how much business that touches. I just redid our kitchen. Everything in my kitchen, it has internet capability. It's got Wi-Fi to it. I don't know when I'm going to talk to my dishwasher through Wi-Fi, or my washing machine, but it's there. But it's touching every part of our lives. That weird caricature of that weird guy. It's everywhere.
So where do we go from here then?
We have a really, really hard, entrenched fight between the power guys and the the TDUs, and we need to get by that. We're fighting over things where we need to be collaborating, and that starts at a local level. And having honest conversations with the TDUs. TDUs are there to serve, and they tell us we have to serve you, we will serve you, we're going to give you this time frame, but we really need to have the conversations about, hey, how do we get private industry in there to run these lines? You know, you need to run 40-mile line for a 345. How do we get this in there? How do we get it done? How can we all work together to do that? You know, yesterday I listened to some talks, and there was a lot of talk about policy and how do we effectively affect policy. And in the meantime, you know, we're going to build a lot of generation, and at some point the power traders are going to get really mad because the price of power is just going to, you know, we're going to have so much power at some point. I look forward to that day.
I think everyone probably will.
Yeah.
Is there any last comments you want to sort of make, Jeremiah, before we wrap this up?
No, Gabrielle, I want to thank you for having me today, and thank you for talking about Prime. I want to thank DCD for this magnificent event. I've learned more in 2 days than I have in a year just by walking around here and meeting some of the great people here. So thank you.
No, well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for being our last speaker on the DCD Talk stage. As I said, it is my pleasure to close this stage for this year, and thank you to the audience for having joined us. A round of applause for Jeremiah.
Thank you.